there, my crafty friends. It's Ashley Pfeiffer, the maker behind Stamped AF. I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Canada, and I'm sorry I'm like so clashing with my DSP. For this month's Stamping Society, we are featuring our favorite bundle, and I chose to kind of feature a suite of products. I just received the Leaves of Holly bundle last week, and I haven't had a chance to play with it, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna do that. Now, I am going to use one of the cards I used for my July ordering special, where if you ordered $60 or more, you got a card kit featuring 4 cards, and this was one of them. So I haven't created it with this bundle. I'm kind of excited to see how it turns out, and I'm guessing there's going to be a huge difference. So I'll do a voiceover because there's any amount of barking and noise that will go on. So yeah, let's get our craft on. I am starting with a piece of Mossy Meadow cardstock. I am scoring it in half both directions, and then we'll cut it from one corner to the other. Now, if you want the full measurements and written step-by-step instructions, you can purchase the tutorial outright. You can shop with me with a minimum order of $35 before taxes and shipping. You can get the tutorial for free, or you can join my team. My team gets the Stamping Society tutorial and much more free every month. So I'm folding and burnishing this. You do get 2 card bases out of one sheet of 8.5 by 11. That is just the nature of scoring it in half both ways and then cutting diagonally. We're going to cut our DSP down and adhere it to the front. I do recommend that when you cut designer series paper on an angle like we just did, that you start in the middle of the paper instead of on one of the corners, because it can really bend that DSP. You can see here that I'm stamping those gorgeous holly leaves. Going to stamp it on the front and the back. I'm spritzing with, I'm using my Stampin' Right marker this time. On my original, I did use the Stampin' Blend, but my Mossy Meadow blend is the brush tip is not in such great shape, and trust me, it's not from the spritzing. It's just not great. So I'm trimming this down so that it meets the cut line on the card base. Like I said, I'm stamping those holly leaves on the back of the panel as well, because when it gets adhered to that card base, we will be able to see both the front and the back. Now, I had one piece that didn't stamp so well, so I'm going to make sure that that gets hidden on the back. A little more spritzing. And I'm going to adhere it here, and I'm only putting it on basically that triangle. So you can see that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm using liquid glue. It is Tombow. It's just in a different container. Here are the 2 patterns of DSP that I've chosen. On my original card, I did use 2 different patterns of DSP. On this one, I decided I was going to use one and then mat the insert with one. So now all I have to do is cut from the top to the bottom, and you'll see here I don't start at the corner. It probably looks like I did, but I lift it a little bit and then start it further up. Now, I want to just say here, if you had directional paper, you have to cut 2 different pieces of 4 by 5 1/4. Otherwise, one of those directional pieces will be upside down. I know this probably looks a little busy. I could have used that other side, but I wanted some of the poinsettias in there, which is kind of funny because there's no poinsettias to die cut. So I'm putting the poinsettias down here. I love this little, almost like a bokeh effect, or bouquet, bokeh, I don't know. I am cutting down a mat to put on the inside. We'll stamp a sentiment here. And the sentiment that I choose is from Our Home to Yours. And after I finished recording and moved on to another video and some more projects, I came back to it and I thought it would be so cute to have a little house on there. So I took the house from the Ringed with Nature stamp set and stamped it in Mossy Meadow and Real Red. You won't see that here because I did it after the fact, but I will try to remember to share a photo. So here I am cutting some of that distressed gold specialty paper and adhesive sheets, and I'm going to apply that adhesive sheet to the back of the specialty paper. This label die is very delicate. So there is the little strips along the outside aren't actually adhered per se, like they're they're kind of free floating. So I thought I'm going to adhere this down. I don't want to mess with glue. So that's what I'm doing. And then there is behind the holly, there's actually that little shape there that you can see me just picking up. You can adhere it to the back of the holly so that you can't see through it. And I loved it. So I used some of that green DSP. And you'll see me fuss around with my adhesive sheet. And I'm sorry I'm so low in the frame here. It does get better. So here's what I mean. They're not adhered. I mean, it is one solid piece, but it's not adhered there. And I know that probably makes no sense, but I hope you understand what I mean. Isn't it gorgeous? So here I decide that I'm going to stamp and emboss. Well, actually, I went back and forth here. So this video was initially over an hour long because you know when you have an idea in your mind and then you come to do it and it doesn't necessarily turn out. This is why I try to have my originals always done in the first place. But I thought, no, I got it all figured out. I'm just going to press record. So I stamped the sentiment on this DSP. It looks good, but I did the berries in that same DSP and it was just too much of the same competing for your eyes. So I will change things as I go, but you are seeing, I mean, you're seeing it not live, but you're seeing how the process went. So you may see things that don't really make sense at the time, but stay with me. Okay, so I stamp these, I'm going to die cut them, and I will play around with them for a whole long time. But I've cut that all out for you. Okay, so I'm die cutting. Got my sentiment and the berries. Keep wanting to call them cherries. So I've used my embossing buddy because I decided I want to put some Versamark on there, and I'm going to add some clear embossing powder. It's kind of like a highlight for that stamp. So I thought it would bring some dimension. It wouldn't be quite so flat, and it would help to stand out from the other DSP with the sentiment. So I'm heating my heat tool on high. When I go to set my embossing, whatever it is I'm embossing, I will bring the heat back down to the lower setting. So I heat it up at 2, set it on 1. And I don't know if the magic of embossing ever gets old. Does it? Okay, so you see it skipped a little bit here. I'm still kind of playing around with how I want this to work. I'm die cutting a solid holly leaf and the detailed holly leaf. Playing. I adhere the outline to the solid holly at some point. That holly is pointing the wrong direction for me. Anyways, I figure it out. Fear not. So I'm just going to use a little bit of Tombow to adhere these. Could have used adhesive sheet, but some things are easier to do than others. I'm going to trim off the little stem of that holly. It helps it to fit in where I need it to when I finally decide where it's going. It's not there. Okay, so here is where I'm playing around trying to figure out how I'm going to get these two things to stand out. So I decide I'm still going to use that same DSP with the sentiment, but I'm going to emboss it in gold. I emboss it twice because one of them I got a weird little string across it. And, if you're going to go through the trouble of embossing, it's almost, you might as well do two of them at the same time just in case something could happen during the die cutting process, and then you got to start all over again. Let it cool for a moment before I die cut it. If I put it through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine right away, it'll smear a little bit. I am adhering it to a little white label of that same label die just to give it a little more stability. And I decide that I don't like the white edges, so I'm going to take my cherry cobbler Stampin' Write marker. Didn't work so well, left a weird mark, so I brought in my cherry cobbler Stampin' Blend, went around the outside edges, and then did a little bit of ink spritz so that it would cover up the boo-boo. Okay, so I've decided that leaf is going to go there. I'm popping up my sentiment. I have die cut two little boughs. I don't know if that's what they're called, but that's what we're going to call them. And they were a little on the light side, so I just went over them with my Mossy Meadow Stampin' Blend. I'm going to pop those there, pop the sentiment up, put the berries there. So when I get my sentiment where I want it to be, I will bring in some of those gold holly leaves, adhere them with mini glue dots, add a few festive pearls. Okay, maybe not in that order, but all of that will be done. And then I honestly don't know why those little gold holly leaves aren't part of this suite of products. I think they are fabulous with this, and I admit I was not a fan of them last year, but wowza. It's always such a guessing game as to where the embellishments should go, right? I decide I'm going to add a couple of the red pearls. I can't remember which color they are, but I'd add those to the berries, and I think it looks kind of funny to begin with, but it adds a little bit of a something something. So if this was your first time joining me, I want to thank you so much. I hope you will consider hitting that subscribe button below. Most weeks you will catch a new video. Some you might even catch two. So thank you again for joining me. And if you recreate this, I would love to see it. You can tag me on Instagram at StampedAF. I want to thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon, my crafty friends. Bye.